Hey everybody, I'm Jay Privman, and hopefully Marty McGee will be joining us shortly. We've got a few little technical problems to iron out, unforeseen right at this 11th hour, but we will be going through this year's Preakness, and let's just get the obvious news out of the way right off the top. Medina Spirit has been approved to run after negotiations between Bob Baffert and his team and officials of First Racing, the parent company of the Maryland Jockey Club, which owns Pimlico, where the Preakness will be run. Medina Spirit crossed the wire first in the Kentucky Derby. We know that there has been an initial split sample that has come back positive for a medication that is legal to use, but not to be in a horse's system on race day. That's according to the information released by trainer Bob Baffert. Nothing has been said yet by either the Kentucky Racing Commission or Churchill Downs. However, the usual protocol, and the protocol here is for a split sample to go out, and if confirmed, then there will be penalties meted out regarding the horse and potentially the trainer. So for now, Medina Spirit is the Kentucky Derby winner. There's certainly the real possibility that he will not be when this is all over, said, and done with. And now let's go to Baltimore and see if we can bring in Marty McGee. Marty, what's the mood back there leading up to the Preakness on Saturday?
It's kind of sad, Jay. It's just there's far fewer media around, and those that are here along with the trainers. This is what you were just talking about. So as you said, it looks very much as if Medina Spirit will be disqualified, and so I mean so that's the overriding story here in Baltimore. It's quite the unusual Preakness.
Well, we'll have to see how it all plays out. Obviously, if the split sample confirms what the initial findings were, then the horse is going to end up being disqualified. I just don't see any way around that. That's just the way the rules are, and that's the facts. I mean, that's how it's going to be. If it doesn't confirm it, then it's considered a negative test. But we'll wait and see how that plays out. So for now, as we just said, Medina Spirit's the winner of the Kentucky Derby. Whether he ends up being the official winner of the Kentucky Derby when this all plays out, we'll have to just wait and see regarding that. So Marty, I'll just start with you. Obviously, he's still the focal point of the race. He is the favorite on the morning line of Keith Fustel. How do you view this horse, knowing what we know about the Kentucky Derby?
I mean, he's looked pretty good in his training. Developed Wednesday and Thursday, a mile and a half, looked okay. As far as race strategy goes, Bob Baffert has said we don't divulge that. Obviously, one of the other primary speeds in the race is his stablemate, Concertour, who's drawn way outside. You would think that Mike Smith would have to send him. So, the key in the Derby, Jay, was him being on the lead the whole way, or easy lope, as they say, and whether or not he will be allowed to get away with that this time is the $64,000 question.
Hopefully everybody heard Marty's answer better than I did. Marty, how do you think the opening part of this race will play out with where those two horses are drawn? And I guess we have lost Marty, so I'll give my opinion on how I think things will go the first part, and then hopefully we can iron things out with Marty's technical issues. We can get his opinion regarding this. It's really an interesting situation with 10 horses in here. Medina Spirit is drawn inside of Concertour, and they really do look like the two best speeds in the race. The thing that we've seen from Medina Spirit so far is that when he gets the lead, he's very difficult to pass. And in the races where he has not made the front, he has run well, but he has not passed other horses and prevailed. So it would seem, based on what we have seen so far from Medina Spirit and where he's drawn vis-a-vis his stablemate Concert Tour, that it makes the most sense for him to be allowed to do what he usually does best, which is go to the lead and try and hang on. Concert Tour, owing to where he's drawn, seemingly would end up stalking in this spot. Maybe if the posts were reversed, things would be different, but it just seems with the way they're drawn that that's the most likely scenario early on. If Concert Tour does have enough speed to make the top and Medina Spirit stalks, he would end up being in a similar spot that he was when he chased his stablemate Life is Good earlier this year. Now, Life is Good certainly at this point seems to be a better horse than Concert Tour, but Concert Tour did run 3 good races before his disappointing loss most recently in the Arkansas Derby, a performance that caused him to skip the Kentucky Derby and instead be rested for this race rather than being jammed back in 3 weeks off the worst performance of his life. He now has a 5-week rest coming in to the Kentucky Derby. So those will be the first 2 choices in the race. We've also got horses like Midnight Bourbon, who's coming off a troubled trip in the Kentucky Derby. And keep me in mind is the other horse coming out of the Derby. Just 3 of the 10 runners exit the Kentucky Derby. 7 of the horses in here are newcomers to the Triple Crown Trail. By my way of thinking, the most notable being not only Concert Tour, but also Rumbauer, who I thought ran a deceptively good race in the Bluegrass Stakes, and we'll show a video of him in a little bit. If we can, let's show a little bit about Midnight Bourbon, and I'll explain one of the reasons why I think he's got a big chance to improve off his performance in the Kentucky Derby. He didn't get away well here. He's in the middle of the group here in the maroon silks of the Winchell family, and he figured to be forwardly placed early, and he just wasn't. He just got off poorly. He's got a white cap there. He's kind of mid-pack. He's kind of getting shuffled back right now, and he's in about 14th place as they come through the stretch the first time. And what was surprising to me was that this horse was behind his stablemate Superstock, who is a known closer. And I really think that because of the early positioning of Midnight Bourbon, he really didn't get a chance to run his best race here. He didn't get off well, and then he got shuffled back. And I thought he ran a good race to rally and finish 6th in the Kentucky Derby, especially considering where he was early on. I think he's going to get a much better trip in the Preakness Stakes. I see no reason why he can't be stalking the 2 early leaders, sitting 3rd, at worst 4th, going into the first turn. And with the Rod Ortiz aboard, I think he's going to get a terrific trip in here. But I thought he ran well in the Derby in the context of where he was early on compared to where you would have expected him to be early on. And that's why I give him a very big chance to win the Kentucky Derby. We'll move on now, and I'll show you one other horse that I want to give a look to here. And then we're going to open up the floor for some questions from all of you out there. Let's take a look at Rumbauer. And this is another horse who I think ran better than the line shows in his most recent start. That's why I give him a big chance, not only to run well on Saturday, but also certainly to be in the gimmicks. Rumbauer finished 3rd in the Bluegrass Stakes, and this is the Bluegrass that we're showing here. And you might remember this race came up without a whole lot of pace in here. Highly Motivated was the known front runner, and he went to the lead. And Essential Quality, who at this point was undefeated and was making his 5th career start. This was his final prep for the Kentucky Derby. They were pretty much 1-2 the whole way around. Highly Motivated's on the lead here, and you can see Essential Quality stalking him, and Essential Quality ends up going on to win. But there wasn't a whole lot of pace on in this race, and I think it compromised the chances of Rumbauer, who has shown that he likes to come from off the pace and appreciates having some pace to run into. And I don't think he really got his best chance here. In fact, there was a 3rd and 4th quarter miles of this race that were run at a pretty rapid pace owing to the slow early half-mile fraction of this race. And I thought for Rumbauer to stay on as well as he did, not getting the kind of pace situation that he wanted, really was a good effort and maybe a better than looked effort on his part. He's going to come up the rail here and finish 3rd in the Bluegrass Stakes. And as with Concert Tour, his connections elected to not go in the Kentucky Derby and to point for the Preakness. Now, one of the reasons that Rumbauer did that and why they chose to point specifically for the Preakness Stakes is because Rumbauer got a free roll in the Preakness. He won the El Camino Real Derby. This Rumbauer coming up the rail behind the 2 leaders, and he's going to finish 3rd. Rumbauer won the El Camino Real Derby, which is a win and you're in for the Preakness Stakes. And owing to that, no entry fees for him to run in the Preakness. They made the decision to skip the Derby and point for this. And I thought that performance that you just watched there was a better than looked effort, even though he was beaten about 5 lengths. I don't think the race set up very well for him. And I thought he ran a good race under the circumstances. I've learned, by the way, that the technical problems that we have with Marty seem to be irreversible. So you're stuck with me for the next half hour or so. That's pretty much all the video I've got to show for you. So there's plenty of time for questions and answers, and let's throw the floor open and see what we've got. We welcome anything regarding this race. And Hubert Gaffney writes in, how can they even have allowed him to enter? He was positive. This is obviously regarding Medina Spirit. He was positive on 5/1/21. That was the date of the Kentucky Derby. And the culprit cream was not determined until 5/11/21. Actually, I'm not sure that's completely accurate. It might have been a day or two before. The trainer stated it was used through April 30th, not on race day. I can only imagine that skin treatment continued May 2nd through the 11th. So how is it still not positive? The withdrawal period is advertised as 14 days. And based on trainer testimony, he was not eligible for entry on 5/11, regardless of the RMTC guidelines. Need an explanation. Probably best asked of the officials at Pimlico. As we said at the top, there was negotiations between Bob Baffert's team and the group at First Racing, which owns the Maryland Jockey Club, which owns Pimlico, and they determined that Medina Spirit could enter. Now, there is pre-race testing going on with Medina Spirit. I would certainly imagine that this specific medication, betamethasone, is being tested for. And if there's any semblance of it in this horse's pre-race test, I can't imagine that he would run. Now, don't forget, the 14-day withdrawal that is listed is based on the usual use for this medication, which is as a anti-inflammatory that is injected into a joint. According to Bob Baffert, what has transpired with this horse in this specific incident is that he was given a topical cream for a skin rash. Now, I don't know if that means that the route of transmission into the horse would affect the withdrawal time as compared to if it was given directly into a joint, but those are some factors. I think regardless, though, your question is a good one. And the knowledge that I have is that this horse is being tested pre-race for a couple of times. And obviously this medication, you'd have to assume, is on the list of things for them to look for. And if it pops up in pre-race, I can't imagine he would be allowed to compete. Let's move on to the next question from Gary Graham, who says, Aqueduct has been a strange surface this spring, and Crowded Trade looks like he has some talent and gets away from Aqueduct for the first time. What are his chances to improve? I think he's got a good chance to improve, and you're right. The surface at Aqueduct is extremely hard to get a line on. It was very deep and tiring, and the Wood Memorial was really kind of an ugly race to watch, and that's the race that Crowded Trade comes out of. I don't know how good that race was, though. I took a position going into the Kentucky Derby that I thought the Wood was a low-rated race, and I didn't want anybody exiting that race, and that's kind of where I ended up for the Preakness as well. I just don't really like the horses that are coming out of that race, and I'm going against them. Now, maybe in this specific case, it'll be like somebody in the on-deck circle when they used to swing like a donut around a bat or with 2 bats and getting off of that deep, tiring surface and onto something a little more glib will benefit him. But I'm taking the position that the Wood was a poor race, and in terms of my gambling for the Derby and now for my gambling for the Preakness, I'm not going to be using any of the horses out of there, Crowded Trade included. Let's move on to the next question. Jerry W. wants to know which Chad Brown horse do we like best? So that would be Crowded Trade, who we just discussed, who finished third in the Wood Memorial and only his third start. By the way, Crowded Trade is the one thing that's interesting, I mean, really interesting about this horse is that his past performances to this point are a mirror of Cloud Computing, who Chad won the Preakness with back in 2017. He won his debut, second in the Gotham, and then third in the Wood Memorial. That's the exact same resume that Cloud Computing had coming into the Preakness that year when he won. The other horse that Chad's running is Risk Taking, and he was really disappointing in the Wood Memorial, finishing seventh in that race. It's harder for me to have an excuse for him there, only because he had run well over that track in his two previous starts. Now, I know Chad Brown said that one of the reasons that he didn't run well in this race is he got hit with a dirt clod and his eye was pretty swollen after the race. And that's a legitimate excuse. Obviously, the horse is not going to perform at his best if he's got some sort of thing like that he's dealing with in the running of the race. It's certainly going to impact how he performs. But that said, I thought he had run well in his two previous races at Aqueduct. So running poorly at that track, I should say, in the Wood Memorial, to me is not as legitimate an excuse as it might have been for other horses, because we'd seen that he could handle that deep, tiring surface, and it was a poor performance on his part last time. So I guess I like Crowded Trade a little bit better of the two, but as I've said here, I'm just not crazy about the horses exiting the Wood, and so I have neither of those horses in my top four in the selections that I made for daily racing form. The next question comes from Clee44, who says, how big a factor is the 2-week turnaround for Derby runners? This is always something that's an obvious question every year regarding the Kentucky Derby to the Preakness turnaround, with the exception of pandemic years like we had last year. Usually speaking, though, the best horses of each crop end up in the Kentucky Derby. And though you often get a lot of newcomers to the Derby trail in the Preakness, and occasionally some of them win, for instance, Cloud Computing, who we were just talking about, by and large, the horses exiting the Derby do best in the Preakness on an overall statistical standpoint. And so while it will likely be the only time in the lives of Medina Spirit and Keep Me in Mind and Midnight Bourbon that they come back in 2 weeks, they usually, on the whole, those horses perform well. I think, though, to your question, one of the things you really have to look at is who might be most impacted and or benefit by the 2-week turnaround. There's pros and cons as I look at it when it comes to Medina Spirit. All of Bob Baffert's Derby winners who have come back in the Preakness on 2 weeks rest have won. The only one of his previous Derby winners who did not win the Preakness was Authentic last year, and that was a year when the Preakness was held 4 weeks after the Kentucky Derby, in that unusual year that we went through regarding everything, including the Triple Crown in 2020. So from that standpoint, I think Medina Spirit should run well. As we discussed at the very top, I think from a pace standpoint, he's going to get another pretty good situation to help his cause. The one thing that I'm concerned about with this horse is that he's not the biggest, most robust thing in the world. And that could be something that comes into play coming back on 2 weeks. Is he the kind of horse that's going to handle that as compared to a horse who's a bigger and stronger horse, like the horse that I prefer in this race, being Midnight Bourbon, who I don't think is going to be impacted at all by the 2-week turnaround. He's a big, strong horse who I think is going to be fine with it. But it's an excellent question. It's one that comes up every year, and it's something that we all have to consider when it comes to the Preakness Stakes when there's just 2 weeks between the two. Let's move on to the next question that we have, and this is from Nor Monarchos. What have I heard from contacts at Pimlico as to how the horses appear energy-wise, and does Medina Spirit seem to be acting the way he did going into the Derby? This is something I wish I could answer for you. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend the Preakness this year, and Marty, McGee, and Dave Grenning are among those who are on site for us there. And I would refer you to what they've reported regarding that. I haven't seen anything from them that would indicate anything positive or negative regarding Medina Spirit. It seems like he's been fine in his training. He hasn't really touted himself in terms of being overly energetic, but he certainly hasn't looked dull either. He's just sort of trained like he normally would, but nothing that would cause you to be either bullish or anti him based on the way he's looked in the morning. And I would certainly advise you to look for some of those on-site reports coming from Marty and Dave over the next day and a half for any updates as to that, as to your inquiry. Believe me, I wish I was there to give you an on-site report, but unfortunately this year just was unable to attend. Joe Knows asks, with everyone knowing that Medina Spirit needs the lead, will others apply pace pressure or let him walk? Here's the situation, Joe. I don't know, even if a horse could apply pace pressure, will they apply pace pressure? By my way of looking at the race, the horse most likely to apply pace pressure is Concert Tour, who comes from the same barn. And it would stand to reason that these two would not hook up in a pace duel where they are detrimental to one another. I do think Midnight Bourbon has the potential to be closer, but I don't think that he was in the Derby. But I don't think Midnight Bourbon is a rocket ship fast kind of horse or has the same kind of pace ratings that you would see from either Medina Spirit or Concert Tour. So even if you wanted Midnight Bourbon to try and go up and hypothetically be head and head with Medina Spirit, I don't know that he could do it, and I don't really know that that would be to his benefit. I think he needs to be closer, but I don't know that he needs to be trying to be rushed off of his feet to go head and head. And looking at the rest of the field, I just don't really see anybody who's got that kind of early speed, you know, like we saw in the Derby where you had Soup and Sandwich, who you knew was going to be prominent early. And we expected Rock Your World to be prominent early, and he probably would have been if he didn't get crushed at the start. I don't see nearly as much potential pace in this race as I did in the Derby. And I think a lot of the success or failure with Medina Spirit is going to be how he reacts to coming back on 2 weeks for the first and likely only time in his career. Let's see if we've got any more here from this next individual who says, I love all things DRF. The two real speed in the race seem to be Concert Tour and Medina Spirit. I agree with you. The Japanese entrant, Francisco Deina, I'm not sure he can go with the aforementioned. Who do you feel is of the two is better, Medina Spirit or Concert Tour, to win the Preakness? I prefer Medina Spirit based on how I think the race is going to unfold the first quarter mile, half mile of the race. I think owing to the draw and owing to what we know about Medina Spirit's performances in the past, he does best when he's on the lead. He's never had a horse pass him when he has made the top in a race. And considering that he's drawn inside of Concert Tour, my belief is that they will let him roll like they did in the Kentucky Derby, and his stablemate Concert Tour will be close, slapped on him, but not going head and head with him and not getting in front of him. I think Medina Spirit can pass horses, but we haven't seen that yet in terms of his performances. When he was chasing Life is Good, he couldn't quite get to him. And when he was in front, as in the Robert Lewis or the Kentucky Derby, he was a bulldog and held on to win both of those races. So for my way of looking at it, Medina Spirit has a better chance than Concert Tour on Saturday, and I rank them as such in my picks in the daily racing form. Tim Jaggers asks, do I like any of the new shooters, any of the newcomers to the Triple Crown Trail? So in the racing form, Tim, my picks in order were Midnight Bourbon, Medina Spirit, Rombauer, and Concert Tour. So the third and fourth choices of those four are both horses who skipped the Kentucky Derby. And I give Rombauer a very sneaky chance in here at a price. certainly to get in the gimmicks, if not do even better than that. As we were showing earlier, when we showed the tape of his performance in the Bluegrass Stakes, I thought it was a sneaky good race owing to the race shape. There was no passing going on in there. He was chasing two horses who were 1-2 the whole way around the racetrack with highly motivated and essential quality. And I thought he ran on well to finish third in that race, in a race where he just really didn't get a whole lot of help up front. He gets an extra 110 yards from the Bluegrass to this race, 1 1/8 to 1 3/16. Hopefully, for his sake, he'll get a little more pace. And one of the things that helps him, I think, is coming into this race fresh. He's coming in off 5 weeks. He's run well with time in between races before, and I think he'll run well again on Saturday. So of the newcomers to the Triple Crown Trail, he's the one that I like best. Let's move on to our next question from Jerry W. Is Todd Pletcher's horse being underrated? And that, of course, is Unbridled Honor. I'll tell you my thoughts on this horse, and I just want to look at his PPs just to remind myself of a couple of aspects of him. His Tampa Bay Derby, I thought, was average at best. He ran on to finish fourth in that race. I didn't think it was much of a race with Helium winning it and Hidden Stash and Moonlight Strike. It just, to me, was a very low-rated kind of race. He ran better in the Lexington last time, absolutely, finishing second. The thing about that race, though, that gives me pause is that the pace of the race was really, really hot. And I don't expect the Preakness pace to be anywhere close to that. And it seems to me that Unbridled Honor probably wants a real hot pace in front of him. And the other thing that helped him last time probably was the off track. He certainly ran a much better race. Prior to that last start, his career best was a 78 when he won a maiden race at Tampa. He got a 91 last time. So I'm a little skeptical as to where this horse is. I think he needs pace. He might need an off track to be at his best. And the weather forecast for Saturday is not for any rain. And I don't think the pace is going to come up good for him. He looks to me like he's kind of one of the lesser lights for the Pletcher barn at the moment. Pletcher had 4 horses in the Derby, this horse obviously not being one of them. And I think he's a cut below really the best of this group right now. So that's why he did not make my top 4 for the Preakness Stakes. Dave Piscopo asks, how hard is it for a horse on the outside to get to the rail? Unbridled Honor won and finished second in his 2 best races, both near the rail, but his post 8 in this race, is that an issue? I don't think so. Obviously saving ground is paramount in racing usually, unless there's just a complete dead rail and you want to be outside. I think with this specific horse, Dave, I just think he's pace dependent. And that's, to me, the bigger issue for this horse on Saturday is I think it's going to be a very moderate pace. And I don't know that they're going to come back to him and set it up for him the way he needs to have it set up. In terms of just in generally speaking, being able to get to the rail, a lot of it obviously depends on the tactics of the horses drawn inside of Unbridled Honor. And if several of those horses leave and he can drop in, I'm sure they will do that and try and save some ground. But if you've got several horses with a similar style, and let's say he's one of 4, and 3 of them are drawn inside of him, it's going to be a bigger challenge to get to the rail. You either need to be used a little more earlier than you might want to be, or you just have to grab a hold and drop back and tuck in and hope the pace unfolds at a quicker pace than I think it's going to, and make a run and try and get up in time. I don't see that happening for him, and that's why I'm skeptical of his chances on Saturday. Let's look at our next question here. Jerry W. asked, why do bettors dismiss a horse off only one bad race when before that they've strung multiple good races together? All those situations, Jerry, I think are based on each circumstance. It really depends on what happened. Let's use Concert Tour as an example. I think he's a good illustrative example for this Preakness Stakes. He'd run 3 excellent races prior to the Arkansas Derby. He breezed home in the Rebel. I don't know what to make of this Arkansas Derby, because as they went around the far turn in that race, he looked to me like he was just breezing. And when Joel Rosario called on him in the stretch, he got no response. And I don't know if he wasn't ready for the race in terms of fitness. I would doubt that. That's usually not a problem with that barn. I don't know if something else happened in the race that caused him to not run as well as he had in the Rebel. But I think when you're evaluating him, you've kind of got to ask yourself, well, is he capable of bouncing back to his Rebel performance? And if so, I might get a better price here than I would have if he'd run off the screen in the Arkansas Derby. By the same threshold, you have to look at the Arkansas Derby and go, geez, that was the first time he'd ever tried a distance as far as 1 1/8 miles. Now he's going to be trying 1 3/16 miles, which is a little bit farther. He should be able to handle the distance, being by a Derby winner in street sense, but maybe he can't. So those are some of the things that as a handicapper you have to wrestle with. There's other circumstances where a horse might not perform well because he needs the lead and somebody went with him and they went too fast too soon and he just emptied out and ran terribly. But he might come back in a pace situation that's much more advantageous. And those are the kinds of situations where I think as a handicapper, you need to be flexible and be able to understand why a horse might not have run well in his previous race, and then hopefully get a better price when they run back. So I think, to your question, it really depends on each horse and how you evaluate why they performed poorly. And if you can find a legitimate reason why they ran poorly that won't be applicable in this specific case, then you've got good value there. If you can't find a plausible reason, or if the same thing's going to happen again, hypothetically, a horse had a pace company and he's now in another hot paced race, it's hard to come back to a horse like that when you've seen that maybe they can't handle that kind of a situation. So that's kind of how I do it when I look at a horse who was consistent and then ran a poor race. I try and understand why it happened, and will those similar circumstances happen in the race that I'm now handicapping. Let's take a look on another question here. We'll have time for several more here. Mike asks, do I feel the 9 to 5 morning line is reasonable or too low? Obviously, this is regarding Medina Spirit, who is the morning line favorite for the Preakness Stakes. I think that's a reasonable line. He finished first in the Derby. He got a strong buyer speed figure in the race, but there's obviously a huge cloud over this horse owing to what's transpired since the Kentucky Derby. And I think it's really hard to gauge exactly how bettors are going to bet based on that. Are they going to look at it and say, boy, this horse is consistent and he's never finished worse than second. He's got the best buyer speed figures in the field. He's got a pace advantage. I'm all in. I'll take 6 to 5. Or are they going to look at it and go, you know what? This horse won with a medication that shouldn't have been in him. I don't think he's going to run as well in his next race. I don't want anything less than 2 to 1 on him. I might not want anything on him at all. I think those are two very real ways that handicappers are going to view Medina Spirit on Saturday. And I thought 9 to 5 by Keith Fustel, who, by the way, is one of the best line makers in the country. I thought him laying him at that price was really just about the right spot you could be. I couldn't quibble. It'd be hard for me to make him much lower than that. I certainly wouldn't want to make him any higher than that. So I thought it was under the circumstances and all the different things that we have to weigh regarding this horse. I thought it was a pretty accurate assessment of where he's going to end up on Saturday. Let's see what the next question is. And let's see, Richard Cowan wants to know, keep me in mind sitting on a big race. No, I'm not sure what to make of this horse, Richard. I thought he ran certainly his best race as a 3-year-old in the Kentucky Derby. I thought his first 2 races were extremely poor. I thought he had a legitimate excuse in his first start of the year, owing to the situation that went on at Oaklawn when the track had that deep freeze and horses couldn't train for a week and a half there. it certainly compromised his chances in his comeback race. And to me, that was just a throwout. He didn't do much better to me in his second start. And that made me think that he hadn't really progressed much from 2 to 3. He certainly ran a better race in the Kentucky Derby. He was fanned wide coming into the stretch, and he ran on well, and he really didn't finish all that far behind my top choice in the race, Midnight Bourbon. But I'm still not convinced that he's made a significant leap forward from 2 to 3 like some of these others in this crop and some of these others in this field have. I'm also concerned for this race, as we were talking earlier about Unbridled Honor, as to how the pace is going to shape up for him. I think he wants some pace to run into. And the way I look at this race, I think it's going to be a very moderate pace. I don't think it's going to be slow, but it's hard for me to envision it being fast. And I think he wants a faster pace to run into than he's going to get on Saturday. So those are my thoughts on Keep Me in Mind. The one encouraging thing I'll say, I don't want to tout you off him if this is your pick. The one encouraging thing I will say about him is that his last race was certainly better than his first 2 this year. And so if you're operating under the theory that he's going to take another leap forward, then to me, he's worth a gamble on. I'm not convinced he's going to do that, but I don't want to talk you off of a horse like that if you like him, because I don't want it on my conscience that I talked you off a 10-1 winner. Let's move on to our next question here from Jerry W., who wants to know, with so many horses opting out of the Preakness every year because of the quick turnaround, is it time to consider restructuring the Triple Crown? No. Let's not forget there have been 2 Triple Crown winners in the last few years, in 2015 and 2018. And for me, I think the way the Triple Crown is set up is one of the reasons that it's so special when a Triple Crown winner wins. It's an incredibly difficult achievement, and I like to see horses pull that off. I think you need a special horse to do it, and I don't want to see it quote unquote watered down. One of the other things that I think should hopefully help going forward in terms of participation in horses coming back in the Preakness, it didn't happen this year, but I think it can in the future, is the new rules regarding Lasix. Most horses need a lot of time to recover from being treated with Lasix, and trainers will tell you by and large that it doesn't knock them out as much when they're not treated with Lasix. Now, it certainly could cause other issues. Obviously, a horse can bleed, or there's a better chance of them bleeding if they're not treated with Lasix. But assuming a horse comes out of a race well, they're not as knocked out from a race from using Lasix as they are obviously when they're not. And so turning a horse back around in a couple of weeks, in theory, is something that should happen more often with horses now that they're not being treated with Lasix. So I would let this play out. I like it the way it is. I think there's going to be more participation from horses in the Preakness in future years owing to the new Lasix rules. So I would want to let this play out before I circle back to that, especially when we've seen the rewards that we've gotten from that in terms of Triple Crown performances in the last few years. Mike, with another question, wants to know how important to me is how a horse looks on the track warming up prior to a race. It's a little bit. I mean, I want to see them looking alert. I'm not going to profess to being the best, having the best eye of anybody when it comes to watching horses work out, but I certainly don't want to see them with sort of a hangdog demeanor, flat tail, head down, just looking like they want to be anywhere else but out there. I'd like to see them a little bit on their toes, but not being insane, just sort of looking alert and eager to compete. So you don't really get a whole lot of time to look at them, but that's my best guess is, or my best assessment, I should say, of what I look at when they're on the track. I give them a quick look when they come out, but there's other, unless I see something really alarming, I'm going to march forward with whatever I've decided going into to that race. So I'm going to give you my top selections for the Derby. I think we're out of questions, and I appreciate all of you hanging in there with me. Hopefully all of this has been informative and will be profitable on Saturday. My top four for the Preakness Stakes on Saturday, in order, are Midnight Bourbon, Medina Spirit, Rombauer, and finally Concert Tour. And unfortunately, Marty McGee couldn't be on with us for the totality of this, but I think we've got his top four here. In fact, here they are. He, as well as me, likes Midnight Bourbon. He picked Rombauer second, Medina Spirit third, and he's got Crowded Trade in the fourth spot. So Marty and I both with Midnight Bourbon, who seems to be a fairly popular selection in daily racing form. So he might not be quite as high a price as we might have liked when this race was drawn the other day. Well, that's about all the time we have for our Preakness preview. I appreciate all of you hanging in there with us. Hopefully we answered all the questions that you had regarding this extremely unusual Preakness Stakes. I'm Jay Privman. You can follow me at DRF Privman on Twitter. Don't forget to open your DRF Bets account and have everything funded for action this weekend at Pimlico. And hopefully we'll be back with you prior to the Belmont Stakes. For the absent Marty McGee and our behind-the-scenes producer, Emily Shields, I'm Jay Privman. Thanks for watching. Good luck this weekend.